And a very good evening. Welcome to the Saturday preview, Friday night at just before 6:30, with myself, Dave Massey. I'd like to say fresh from Newbury. I've been working this afternoon for NT Racing at Newbury, and I will be doing it again tomorrow. It's been a long day already. Been up since sort of just after 6 o'clock this morning. Had a look at the form on the way down and sort of finalised a few bits and pieces tonight. On what is, I've just concentrated mainly on the Newbury card. I have got one at Bangor that's of interest as well, but I've concentrated mainly on the Newbury card and on these sort of nightmare to solve handicaps, really. Very, very difficult. There's about 5 of them on the card. And it's really just a case of I've sort of gone through each race and picked 2 or 3 out that are of interest, and then I'll sort of decide when I've got a bit more time in the morning how I'm going to play them on prices and whatnot. I think the first thing they sort of say, I've been watching Newbury's races today, and the fact that they did change the ground from soft to good to soft after a couple of races, and they were finishing the races off okay at Newbury today. Didn't look that bad, and looking at the results now and looking at the times of the races, it would suggest it probably was no worse than good to soft. It was they were getting through it absolutely fine. It'll probably dry a little bit more tomorrow, I think. It'll be cold tonight, but there's no rain forecast. It may well dry a little bit. So when I was sort of looking in the week thinking it was going to be soft ground and trying to find 1 or 2 mudlarks, I think it's probably out the window now, in truth. It doesn't make it any easier to solve these races, I have to say. So we'll go through each of the sort of 5 hard handicaps on the card. The first 2 races, from a betting perspective, aren't of a great deal of interest, although I do wish Connections of Early Morning Rain the best of luck in the first. I know 1 or 2 of them. They're nice. They're good people, and I hope Early Morning Rain, who looks a really nice prospect for them, runs one in the first. The 1:15, the just short of 2 miles, 7 furlong handicap chase is the first of the handicaps. Highway 101, of course, is in here, who I fancied for the Bet Victor. Drifted like a barge in the week and then sort of came back in a little bit on the day. 2 worries. 1, now the Chris Gordon yard's a little bit out of form, and 2, I'm not entirely sure that 2 miles 7, I think I'll stretch his stamina a little bit. Those are my 2 sort of concerns with Highway 101, but he still remains of some interest on last season's form. Of that there's absolutely no doubt. I'm sure there is a big handicap in him, and he, I don't know, maybe when we get back round to festival time, something like the Brown Advisory might be his race. We'll see. Molyneux was another one a bit further down. Colin Tizard, Robbie Power taking the ride. Just sort of shaped all right over course and distance after 8 months. I should say 8 months, 6 months off here earlier in the month, when some 12 lengths behind Deserti. I think that's reasonable form. As I say, it was a case of he needed the run like so many of Collins have done, and he's now on a marker 128, which is £1 lower than when he won at Wincanton earlier in the year on good ground. So from a handicapping perspective, he's right there. I think the drying ground will definitely help him. I think the trip, he's yet to win over this sort of trip, but he has gone close. I mean, he over 3 mile at Exeter, he ran Captain Cattystock to a length in February, so I don't think there's any issue with the trip either. I think he's moderately interesting, and so too is Tikur. Alan Jones, a fairly lightly raced 11-year-old, it must be said. He's a horse that keeps getting underrated for these sort of races. He is this class, he has won in this class, and he is a Newbury winner as well. That come in March last year when he panned Cape Adventure off a marker 123. He's off 127 tomorrow, which still looks fair enough. He's gone well fresh in the past. The ground, he probably wouldn't want it to dry out much more than it is. And he keeps shaping like he's worth a go at this sort of trip. He has done in the past, and the last time we saw him, which was last December, nearly a year ago since we last saw him, when he finished 4th to Warrior's Tale at Aintree, got beaten under 10 lengths that day, was doing sort of plenty of good late work again, and the way he stuck to the task up the running sort of suggested this sort of trip was quite interesting for him. I think if you pin me down to 1 at the moment, it's probably Molyneux, but they're reasonable prices, both him and Tikur. I may back them both. The 150 is handicap hurdle over 2.5 miles. The first one to really catch the eye here was an old friend of mine, And Peter the Mayo Man is a huge horse, really big horse, Peter the Mayo Man. And the key to Peter the Mayo Man, he's got to have decent ground, which he has had one or two. There's been a couple of occasions already this year where he's been declared a non-runner on ground that was simply too soft for him. He can't go on soft ground, but on decent ground, he's all right. He travels okay. 2.5 miles is a little bit of an unknown for him. Having said that, there's a couple of bits of his novice chase form, one in particular at Musselburgh last year where it was over 2.5 and he was still travelling perfectly well. When he fell, I think it was about 3 out, and he was still travelling well that day. Yes, you can argue his stamina had yet to be tested, but he was still on the bridle area. I think he'll get 2.5, and he gets his ground. And again, he's another one of these that just sort of shaped after a year off, like he'd still got his ability at Cheltenham when he was 7th to Benny's Bridge in October. And the way that he sort of stayed on again there from the last, that was over sort of 2 mile, half a furlong. And again, he just sort of under not a lot of pressure really from Ed Austin, gave the impression that the ability is still there. So the drying ground will help him. 2.5 is an unknown, but you're backing a Dan Skelton horse. It won't lack for fitness, and you're backing him at 25. Harry Skelton takes over as well. Harry takes over from Ed Austin. So 25-1, all of that made him look moderately interesting. I thought he had a chance. Pride of Lacal, I have to mention, but he has been well found by the market. He's a 6.5 chance here. He's towards the front of the market, and rightly so. On bumper form, he was absolutely thrown in at market raising, and when I was there that day, it was the day that it nearly got called off. The rain kept coming, and it was in the last race of the day. It was absolutely awful, the ground by that point. And when the rugs came off, there was only one winner, and it was Pride of Lacal. He just looked different class than the rest of them in the paddock. He really did just shine in his coat, and he looked like a horse that was 2 or 3 grades better than the rest of them, and that's how he travelled, and that's how he won. Now, handicappers reacted to that with a £13 rise, but even that still makes him look really well handicapped, on his bumper form, and there's a load more to come from Pride of Lacal. Whatever his problems were last year, he looked completely over them at market raising, and he has to go high on anybody's list with Fergal O'Brien still banging the winners in. So I think those two are the interesting pair, really. As I say, it's a pity Pride of Lacal's been as well found as he has. I was sort of half hoping that the fact that he's up a couple of grades and he's up in the weights might result in a bigger price than 13-2, but he's extremely hard to knock, and he will travel well again tomorrow, of that I'm sure. The 225, this is interesting. This is an intermediate limited handicap hurdle. Now this is a 0 to 155. This is the first thing to point out. This is a 0 to 155, this race. Top is Scarlet Dragon off 141, some £14 below the ceiling, a stone below the ceiling. This is not a strong race for the grade and for the money, it has to be said. That doesn't mean it's not competitive. It is, and you can give plenty of them a chance on bits and pieces of form. Favourite, I think, is Epatante, which I sort of get and I sort of don't. Came over from France last year with a big reputation, won a couple of Mickey Mouse contests, Kempton and Exeter, and then went to Cheltenham and was 9th to Eglantine de Soy in the Mayor's Novice Hurdle. It's an all right run. And I think, I think she's favourite because she is unexposed and there's more to come from her. But it's interesting that handicapper didn't rate her that much. She was rated 143 again into that race. She's now 137. She falls into that cliched bracket of could be anything. But it could be anything at 7-2 makes no appeal to me. I'll tell you what I'd have here as favourite. I'd have Elvis Mail as favourite here. I really would. The Nick Alexander horse. Look at some of his form last year when he was 3rd to Rouge Vif in a Grade 2 at Kelso. That's a decent race. He split Windsor Avenue and Getaway Trump that day, and I think people thought it was a bit of a fluke. It certainly wasn't, because he'd shown before the time at Ayr, when he didn't jump particularly well either at Ayr. He gave Galvin a fright, and Galvin's a very solid sort of 130, 140 horse all day long. So the fact that Elvis Mail is in here on 138 still, he's gone up £6 for winning at Ayr in soft ground, where he absolutely cruised round in 3rd gear before he was asked to put the race to bed late in the day. I mean, he just quick and clear on the running. He's a horse with a turn of foot, and he'll probably get this run to suit. I think he should be favourite, Elvis Mail. 11-2 is fair, in my opinion. It's fair, and he'd have to go sort of top of the list. There's plenty in here I'm not mad keen on. I think they're sort of now towards the top end of their marks, and there's one or two of the ground's probably gone a little bit against. Elusive Bell is the sort of second favourite, the other Henderson horse for Whaley Cohen, and she didn't do anything wrong when she beat Laxey at Warwick last time, and she looks progressive. However, I thought at a bigger price. I think there's some 28, and I'm hoping there'll be some 33 kicking around on Storm Goddess right down the bottom of the handicap. First caught the eye at Doncaster in January when she beat Man of the Mountain. I say beat, I mean she panned Man of the Mountain that day, beat 7 lengths. And since then, Man of the Mountain has shown himself to be a 120 horse all day long. So I think the fact that she beat him so easily, and she's off 1-2-2 today, still makes her look well handicapped. She's got some form at Newbury as well. She was second to Humble Hero here in March. That race hasn't really worked out as well as I thought it'd done. There hasn't been a winner out of the race. There's been a few of them placed in decent company, but there hasn't been a winner out of the race, which is a little bit unfortunate. But again, another one of these that shaped nicely on reappearance when midfield at Wincanton, 5th behind Midnight Midge, looked a big threat turning for home, blew up, stayed on again. Now that was over 2.5, and as I say, back to 2 miles today with a tongue tie on for the first time in what promises to be, you know, a solidly run handicap. That might just be her bag, and I think, as I say, off 1-2-2, there's some leeway there. There's definitely some leeway, and I think she's better than this. So I think she's quite interesting as well. She's sort of been overlooked by the market, and I'm not entirely sure why, because she is, as I say, still fairly unexposed in handicaps, and I think she's got a decent each way chance. So they'd be my 2 there. Then we get to whatever they're calling it this year, the Hennessy. We know it as the Hennessy. It's the Ladbrokes Trophy. 3.25 miles. I went through this race in the week, and you know what? I mean, I know there's a lot of runners here, but you can put the pen through half of these almost straight away, can't you? I can't. There's so many of these I can't give a chance to. I really struggle to sort of see how they can win off the marks that they're off. Some of them, the form that they're in. Some of them I don't think particularly want to go left-handed. Some are better right-handed. And I think there's half of these you can put the pen through straight away. One I had originally put the pen through, and now I'm going to have to sort of put back in again, was Dingo Dollar, because I was sort of thinking it would be bad ground, and I immediately ruled Dingo Dollar out. He's 3rd in this last year off a mark of 148 to size in Tennessee. Now, he did get beat, you know, solidly last year. It was a good. He got beaten about 15 lengths, I think, and he's off 146 this year. So you can argue that, you know, he probably still needs to come down a pound or two. But the fact that the ground might be coming in his favour, I think is interesting. As is the fact that he's got a first-time visor on. He was missing any form of headgear when he was 3rd here in a handicap hurdle at the beginning of the month, and that was a run that sort of suggested he'd still got, you know, all the ability was still there. So I think Dingo Dollar's quite interesting. My sort of first pick for the race, again, I'm a bit disappointed at the price. I think off the back of a bad run at Ascot, I was hoping for bigger than 8-1 about Mr. Malarkey. I think you just put the pen through that. Whatever the problem was at Ascot, I mean, he got beaten far too far for it to be true. And you just concentrate on what he was doing last year. He beat Now McGinty at Ascot, fair and square. You know, then he was 4th atop of the game at Cheltenham, doing plenty of good late work. 2nd to Kildisart at Aintree. It's all good, solid graded form. And a marker 150, I think, still leaves him room for manoeuvre. John Joe O'Neill takes another 3 off as well, which is stealing 3, quite frankly. And I say, if the cheek pieces work, he's always given the impression to me that he's a thorough stayer, Mr. Malarkey. If those cheek pieces work, I think I'd nearly have him favourite for this. And but as I say, having said that, I thought to myself, they'll miss this. You know, it would be a bigger price than he is because of the run at Ascot behind Vindication, where he just didn't travel. He isn't. He's 8-1. It's a fair price. It's a reasonable price. I was hoping for bigger, but that's me because I'm greedy. But I think 8-1 is fair, and he's one that's got the potential to take this race apart, I think. Bigger prices. The only one really of the old boys that's a bigger price. You've got the two Irish horses that you can't ignore. Cabaret Queen, Barrice, both very interesting, and Barrice particularly having beaten Black Courton last time we saw him in the plate at Galway. I think he's obviously interesting. West Approach. I'm struggling to see why West Approach is a considerably shorter price than the conditional. There's quite a big difference there. Conditional's nearly twice the price of West Approach, and yet I thought the conditional beat him, fair and square at Cheltenham, and that form obviously has been franked since, with the West Approach coming out and winning himself. 20-1 looked fair, but again, I don't think he probably wants the ground drying out. The only one that made a little bit of appeal was Joe Farrell with the ground drying out. Those with good memories will remember him winning the Scottish Grand National back in 2018. So all he does is stay. That was off a mark of 135. He's off 144 today, which is probably as high as you'd want Joe Farrell. But he's a 10-year-old, but he's pretty lightly raced. I think the trip in the ground's absolutely fine for him, but we know it is because we saw him come out over course and distance and run Chic Name to a length and a half here in March. The quicker they go up front, I think the better Joe Farrell's chance. I thought he was quite interesting. Again, 28, and I'm hoping there'll be some 33 around in the morning. So with conditions, absolutely ideal for him. He is at the top end of his mark, but he should run his race, I think, under, as I say, the conditions are bang on for him. So 33-1 looks acceptable if there's any of that around. And then we've got one more handicap. I won't keep you too long. We've already gone over the quarter of an hour to try and keep these things too. But it is a very interesting one. And I need to give some kudos here to my good lady who pointed this one out to me in the week. And those of you that read the punt on a regular basis will know how much I keep banging on about David Jeffries. He's already landed 2 or 3 big gambles and nearly landed one at Catterick again the other day, with one in, I think it was in a bumper, and he nearly landed one from, I think it was about a 20 chance into about 15-8 at the off. And he's got a very interesting one here in Tree of Liberty, and my good lady said to me, have you seen Tree of Liberty on Saturday? He's got no other entries. I know she's bet it at a bigger price than the 18-1 that's around now, but he is still interested in 18. Now we're down to sort of final decks. You look at what Tree of Liberty did last year for Kerry Lace. This is his first run for David Jeffries, as I say. First time up last year after an 8-month break. We hadn't seen him since April. Came out in December last year at Ludlow and failed to give Cape Land £7. Just got beaten half a length. Now, how good does that form look now? That looks really good form. From then on, he just sort of lost his form a bit throughout the season. He didn't run too badly at Wetherby in January, but then was a bit disappointed, I think, behind Croquet Bay. Although, obviously it was a tough race to win the Grand Annual, but you might have expected slightly better. And then he unseated his rider in the Silver Trophy at Cheltenham back there in April behind Mr. Whittaker, when he was not done with, but others looked to be travelling better than he did. First time out for David Jeffries, might be the time to catch him. He's going to get this run to suit as well. There is some pace in the race, which he'll be able to sort of sit off in midfield, come through with his run. He's off that same mark as when he ran Cape Land to half a length, and I think that's a key point. That was off 143, he's off 143 today. This is obviously more competitive than the sort of races that Mr. Jeffries has been trying to land gambles in, but nevertheless, I think Tree of Liberty is very, very interesting in this. And the other one that in the race, you sort of rub your eyes a little bit and go, is that right? Is this 2 miles? There's No Comment. Again, we've seen No Comment. Well, we've seen No Comment run over as long as 4 miles in the National Hunt Chase back in 2018 when he was 6th to Rathbinden. No Comment's probably better known as a 3-miler, but I just wonder, because he does travel well in these races, as he did again last time at Hereford, travelled really well when third to Valdez. Whether 2 mile, a fast run 2 mile, I wonder whether that, this could be his thing. He certainly won't be failing for a lack of stamina, and if we can get extra places in the race as well, it's not hard to see him staying on late. They may just go a stride too quick for him, but as I say, he does, if he can jump, he does travel really, really well in his races, and perhaps a fast run 2 mile is what he wants. Very interesting. Dropping back, Richard Johnson takes the ride. I wouldn't rule him out. I know you look at it and think this is surely too short a trip, but we've seen it before with these sort of travelling horses. When you drop them back in trip, they can finish their races off that a bit better. So I think he's quite interesting. Best bet out of all that. Oh, I haven't even told you about the Bangor one. Very quickly, 2:30 at Bangor, Dublin 4, who is in the novice hurdle there against a couple of horses. Jelski's one, and there is a Donald McCain horse, the name of which escapes me, but I know it's a Munir horse. Both of those two have got little bits and pieces to prove now for me. Dublin 4 has a little bit to find on form, but the form that he showed last time now, he sort of went in the notebook there anyway. It was in a race where Trincomalee Lee was third. Now we've seen Trincomalee Lee come out and run really well in the novice hurdle here in what looked a really classy race. So I'm marking that Dublin 4 form up a little bit. 9-2 Paddy Power and Bet Victor on the early shows. Wouldn't surprise me if he went off at least second favourite here if there was some money for him against a couple of horses. I think Jelski's run okay twice, but he's only run to his bumper form. No better than that. He might not be improving. That might be as good as he is. And the McCain horse has plenty to prove after a sort of disappointing first effort. I think now, again, I haven't got it in front of me. I think now they go for tongue tie and cheek pieces in an effort to try and turn it around. That might work. It might not. So I thought Dublin 4, 9-2 in that novice hurdle at Bangor was quite interesting. What's the best bet out of all that lot tomorrow? I don't know. I'm hopeful for Mr. Malarkey in the Ladbrokes Trophy. I think Elvis Mail is a really solid one in that handicap hurdle at 225. Best of luck with all your bets tomorrow, guys. I've kept you far too long. As I say, I'll be back Tuesday. Hopefully we'll catch up then and we'll do some my catches next week. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.